My name is Kevin Cook. I've been working in advertising for a little while. I live in Shanghai. I've been there for 4.5 years. And I'm going to introduce the AllSpark chain to you today. So I want to ask you, do you remember a time 30 years ago when you would sit down with your family and have coffee and breakfast, and you would catch up on the daily happenings in the newspaper, right? And this newspaper was funded by you, the reader, and also by the newspaper's advertisers. So essentially, this is a very simple chain where you as a reader were paying for content, and the advertisers were paying for your attention. Now it's a little bit different. You're probably getting most of your news today on one of these social media platforms. Probably Twitter. If you're like me, if you live in China, it's probably WeChat, the one on the far right. And even these traditional news platforms like CNN, NBC, and the New York Times, they report their news on these platforms. They're indispensable. So now before I introduce the AllSpark chain to you, I'm going to talk to you about the three main players in this, and you are definitely at least one of them. So UGC, right? All of you probably have a video camera and a microphone in your pocket right now. If you have a smartphone, you are technically a person who can create user-generated content. Next, self-media. This is a term that we coined for anyone who has a wide influence, or actually anyone who has even a meager influence, whether you're someone with a few dozen friends from high school on Facebook, or you're someone with a few 100,000 loyal followers and fans, you are your very own self-media. And finally, advertisers, right? Even today, 30 years after this newspaper era, advertising of commodities, brands, and services is just as important as it's ever been. And brands, just like before, are trying to create this connection between you and some service that they're selling. And all of these are very interconnected. And in fact, they will often overlap. And I'll demonstrate exactly how that works in just a moment. But before we do that, let me share with you the inherent problems that advertisers, UGC, and self-media all experience. For advertisers, the cost per click and the cost per 1,000 views is getting higher, and the conversion rate is getting lower, which leads to higher costs. What's more, self-media and partnerships associated with advertisers and self-media are highly dispersed, so it's really difficult to put the right branded content in front of eyes that will actually consume it. Next, the advertising data that advertisers see might not be correct, right? If it's provided by the service provider, how does an advertiser know that that data is real, it's legitimate? And finally, an ROI is close to impossible to monitor because, again, these platforms, these centralized platforms, aren't exactly transparent. Next, with self-media, right? It's difficult to put the appropriate content, like I said before, in front of the right eyes because of how dispersed self-media is. Also, the Matthew effect. I'm sure you've heard of this. Essentially, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And self-media is certainly not immune. So approximately the top 1% of self-media today are working with approximately 90% of advertisers. So what that creates is a huge decrease in enthusiasm for anyone to be a product of self-media. And finally, for people who create user-generated content, let's face it, only a handful of people are going to see the things that you upload when you put it on your social media, unless you have a really significant following, which I'm sure some of you do. But these centralized apps and websites make it really difficult for grassroots to emerge. I'm sure some of you have amazing cameras. You produce amazing videos, right? You write great stories and make great music. But how is that ever going to get to the right audience? It's very difficult with these centralized apps. And good luck getting a copyright, right? You upload something, and I've experienced this multiple times as a blogger. I've seen my content uploaded to these Western platforms and then immediately taken and re-uploaded onto Chinese platforms, and I have no control over it, right? It's very frustrating because I can't reap any benefits from this massive audience that's consuming my content that I created. So, Let's rebuild this production relationship, and that's what AllSpark is here to introduce to you. So here's an ideal relationship right here. It's in its very simplest form. The income from a consumer goes to the creator of the content, the UGC, as well as the self-media. Right now, this is virtually impossible because there's always some kind of middleman, some kind of centralized app that interferes with this. But if a dividend can be equally shared, everyone would benefit equally. All right, here's one more ideal means of relations of production here. Right, so the income of the consumer is going direct to the advertiser this time, and a dividend is then being given to the UGC, the person who created the content, as well as a dividend is being shared to the self-media, the person who shared it. So in many ways, the self-media is being paid the same way that an advertiser is being paid, right? I guess in basic terms, a really easy way to remember this sort of model would be your grandmother could make some kind of passive income off of an affiliate partnership with something she shared on her Facebook. So if that sounds a little complicated, I'll hopefully highlight some examples a little bit further that can make it a little more easy to understand. So that's where the AllSpark land chain ecology comes into play here, right? All the components link this relationship together. It will drastically increase security for everyone involved, ensuring copyrights for content creators, and make sure that everyone gets a fair share. If you're someone with a massive following on your social media and you share something that leads to a conversion, to a sale, why shouldn't you get a share of that? You're acting as an advertiser. Whether or not you realize it, you are advertising goods, commodities, and services every day on your social media. So, what has the power to do all of this? The AllSpark token. This is indispensable because it forms a value consensus for all of the contents created on these decentralized apps that would be created on the AllSpark blockchain, as well as centralized apps that you're already using. So all trades in this AllSpark ecology would be completed with the AllSpark token. Now, this is probably going to sound lofty, but in fact, we believe that Google, Facebook, Baidu, right? Baidu, a Chinese giant, AllSpark has the potential to grow larger than all of these combined. Right? You might chuckle a little bit, but the bottom line is this. These platforms have yet to reach their full potential because they are centralized, and AllSpark has the ability to connect all of these together. So here's some examples real quick of how these decentralized apps, or here are 3 decentralized app examples that we could apply to this AllSpark chain. So here's one scenario. There's an American author named Bob, and it says Game of Thrones. Obviously, Bob didn't write Game of Thrones, but Bob wrote this amazing novel, and he publishes it to a decentralized app on the AllSpark platform. There's a guy in China named Wang who sees it, and it's a great story. And Mr. Wang not only loves the story, he sees an opportunity here. So he reaches out to Bob via the AllSpark platform, and they enter into a smart contract where Wang will adapt Bob's novel and distribute this novel on the AllSpark platform for Chinese readers. Wang will then pay AllSpark credit to Bob for the copyright. Sorry, I'm moving quickly, but time is of the essence. Wang will then adapt this, the Chinese version, upload it to AllSpark, and from there, we as the self-media can take it from the AllSpark platform, this decentralized platform, and share it on these centralized platforms that we already know. These are some Chinese examples like WeChat, Baidu, Weibo, that are really popular. So again, Chinese readers get a little preview of the novel. They like the first 1 or 2 chapters, and then after reading a couple chapters for free, they opt to buy the rest of the book or buy in paid chapters. The same thing could be applied for television shows, videos. The same model could essentially work that way. And then the best part is a dividend would go fairly to every party involved. Bob would receive his share according to the smart contract. Wang would receive his share. And the self-media would in turn receive a dividend. You, as someone who shares this novel on your social media, would get a small portion. Imagine going to bed after sharing some information like this, and you've got 24 AllSpark tokens in your account, and you wake up and you say 24.5 the next day. That's because a couple of your friends bought something that you shared. That would be pretty cool, and it's possible. Here's another scenario. A Chinese travel company wants to promote its tour to the Antarctic, but it doesn't have an agency. It doesn't have a team to create content. So it uploads a mission to an AllSpark decentralized app. And there is a writer named Hou Dezhu who lives somewhere in China, and he sees this, and he takes this mission, and he writes a great story, but he lacks a great photo. But that's okay, because Alice from another country has uploaded some photos from her trip to the Antarctic, which Hou Dezhu can use. So he reaches out to her, they negotiate a smart contract. Hou writes the copywriting. He uses Alice's photo. He submits it for reviews for the advertiser. And then it is published on the AllSpark platform with the advertiser's approval. Again, we see the self-media model here. People like it. They start to share it, right? Netizens read it. Wow, this is great. They decide to purchase it. A little expensive, but hey, you know, you're going to the Antarctic. And then everyone in this chain receives a fair share. The UGC-A, UGC-B, from different countries even, the advertiser, and of course, the self-media, the people that shared it. And all of this is possible because even though they're in different countries, they use the AllSpark token, which again forms a value consensus for all parties involved. Again, here's the same model, just a little bit different with an interface. Finally, our third scenario. An advertiser releases a design task, right? This company has the means to produce clothing, but they lack the funds to create designs, right? They need some creatives here. So they upload a task on an AllSpark decentralized app. And if these designers all accept the tasks and begin uploading their different designs, netizens begin to buy and spread these designs. And the AllSpark tokens are paid to these designers using a share of the revenue generated by the confirmed sales. Self-media can also share these, and again, they will benefit from this whole transaction. Advertiser pays the agreed costs and proceeds, and the designers, again, can turn into advertisers by sharing this on their own social media. Oh, and of course, anyone who isn't selected by this company as a losing designer would feel safe knowing that they have a copyright. The design that they worked hard on is still safe because it's uploaded to the blockchain. So finally, here's some advantages of how decentralized apps could function on the AllSpark chain. One, they can be combined with related centralized apps. Like I said before, these decentralized apps, which will soon be created, could be connected with Facebook, Baidu, Google, Weibo, and basically being the first of its kind to do anything like this. Operation costs would be reduced to a minimum for the advertiser and for UGCs. It would be faster and more secure for everyone involved, right? Especially for advertisers, there's no money on the front end. Content creation is cheaper and easier. And finally, ROI monitoring is fully transparent for advertisers. You will know exactly where every sale comes from and exactly what works and what doesn't, so you know exactly where to put your money. Here's how I know AllSpark will succeed. Not only do we have an abundance of resources, but we have a stellar team of partners, and we have the know-it-all in advertising and social media. In fact, where's my partner from Shanghai? Kevin Yuan? You here? No? Anyway, Kevin's helping me to create this project. Basically, we're working with Wanchain. He's got all these connections with Baidu, Tencent, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn. We've got 20,000 advertisers ready with more than $1 billion in annual income. More than 90,000 active self-media who additionally provide 7,000 daily pieces of content on platforms like Baidu and Tencent within the China sphere. Essentially, what we have is the greatest launching pad for this application because all of these players are going to jump into it when it is launched. So finally, here are our goals. First, the bottom line. We understand advertisers. We understand the problems that the media faces, and we understand that there is an unlimited demand that is yet to be met, and thus, AllSpark is born. With AllSpark, we can turn our social media into real, tangible income. Advertisers will reduce their marketing costs and have real ROIs that they can see transparently. And also, the more creative you are, the more wealth you will achieve. Everyone involved wins. So, thank you so much.